Welcome to the channel, Ham Radio Dude, and today I'm excited to tell you that my radio signal made it all the way to Australia, big deal, on 200 milliwatts of power. I've done that before in my sleep. Hooked up to a 14-foot gutter, utilizing the ZachTek WSPR Desktop Transmitter, and I really like this device. I've had it for about a month and a half now. I've used it a few times, and I want to tell you all about it, show you the interface, and tell you why I think it's a great tool, but also a fun toy. I know there's no toys in ham radio because ham radio is serious business, but just for the sake of it, let's talk about this today. Let's get started here on the desk. Technical difficulty. Take 3. Here we go. This is the WSPR transmitter from ZachTek. Now there's 3 models. We'll get into all that in a moment, but let's just take a look first here at the outside of this device. Now it's a nice solid metal case, which is cool, and it's fairly small. Okay, there's a couple of different SMA female connectors on here, one for the GPS antenna, which is a female, and one for the transmitter output or your antenna, which is also a female, SMA female. Now, USB on here, this USB either powers the device or powers and transfers data to the device. What I'm saying is you could hook this up to a computer and you could use a program to program this how you want this to run, but you don't need a computer. And I'll explain that in just a moment as well. Furthermore, if you just wanted to have a USB on here, 5 volts up to 300 milliamp hours, and you could run this thing completely separate without a computer, which is a very, very useful thing. One thing I'll make a note of, I bought this at a ham fest, so I was missing a foot, and you know, that's what it is. I could easily take these feet off, or I could just go to the store and I can get a new one. Let me actually show you real quick on ZachTek's website about the 3 different models. As you see, this is the Mid Plus. Here at ZachTek's website for the WSPR Desktop Transmitter, we see that there's multiple models. Model Low for bands 2190 meters and 630 meters. We have the model Mid Plus, which is 160 meters, 80 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters, and 20 meters. High Plus, which is 17 meters, 15 meters, 12 meters, 10 meters, and 6 meters. And then the 80 to 10, which is for 80, 40, 30, 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10. Now, what that means is this device that I have, the model Mid Plus, is specifically set up to operate on those bands with the correct filtering. We'll get into that here in just a moment. So what's going to happen is we're going to hook all of this up, okay? We're going to hook it up first and initially to our desktop to get everything configured, and then we'll go ahead and hook up the GPS, and we'll just hook this up to a random wire at the moment. And speaking of random wire, this is what was interesting. I was reading ZachTek's website, and this thing is underpowered for what it is, meaning it probably could output more power, but it's set to a limit of 200 milliamp hours or 250 milliamp hours. I'll get you an exact number here in just a moment. The thing that makes that really nice and beneficial is, and they say it on the website in the forums, really good forums on ZachTek's website, by the way. He says, yeah, you could technically, in theory, run this on a piece of wire and you're not going to damage your transmitter. Essentially, the standing wave ratio, the reflective power back in here won't damage the device. And so I tested that for a good 12 hours. I ran this on 160 meters, 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, and so forth on a 2-meter Yaki antenna. And yeah, this thing still operates fine and flawlessly afterwards. So that was kind of cool. I've also been using this for all my tests, like, you know, when I go out and I get a new antenna and I want to test to see, you know, how far is my signal being heard even with 250 milliwatts, or how's the propagation today, right? So it's been pretty fun. Make all that work. We need to set up the transmitter initially, and we're going to do that through software. So on ZachTek's website, you download some free software that looks like this. This is the software, and this is not how you would see it when you initially set it up, but you could do things like put in all your information. So for example, our device name, and I labeled mine something silly like my call sign and then shh for whisper. But anyway, then you're going to go through this configuration that's here, as you could see, and you know, you put in your call sign. As you could see, since I have the unit that does pretty much 160 through 20 with the low pass filtering, the correct filtering, I selected the bands that I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to try to send a signal out and see if I was heard on any, you know, beacons or anybody listening. And so I selected 80 through 20. Initially I did select 160, but I don't think I was having much luck with that anyway. I did try some of these like 10 meters as well, and maybe I was heard. We'll see here in just a few moments. Now there's a couple other options here when we look to our right, and we have a location, and you could do GPS. So if you hook your device up to GPS, you know, by using that SMA, you can select GPS. Now, of course, indoors, you're going to have issues. And since I was kind of operating pretty much indoors, I got the GPS out to the window and I had about a 60% sync, but I decided just to use the manual EN52, which is where I'm at. And then my reported power. Now, this should be set to whatever your WSPR transmitter device would be using. And then finally, you could actually set this pause after boot to something like 480 seconds or 180 seconds, depending on. But I just wanted to continue to let this thing transmit as much as it would per se. So I didn't have any kind of pause. If I continued on here, I can get the device status, what hardware I'm running, what firmware I'm running. And you should look on ZachTek's website because there are times when the firmware is updated, new features are added, bugs are fixed, and so forth. But then we also get a idea of the position or the GPS lock. Now, I can also use this as a signal generator, but also we're going to go to this boot configuration in a minute, and I'll tell you why. But first, we need to go to our serial port. And I'm set to serial port 17, which is what my computer will see this device using. And unfortunately, if I click read settings right now, I'm not going to get any, or I shouldn't get any kind of response because the device isn't plugged in, right? So one of the things that I notice is, yeah, maybe the reread settings doesn't really work per se, because if it was working right now, it would say, hey, that comm device wasn't found, hey, are you sure it's plugged in? But regardless, let's go ahead and plug it in then and reread the settings one more time. This is the GPS. And as I mentioned, that's included, or it was included when I purchased this at a Hamfest. Now for the antenna, I'm actually going to plug into that gutter that I was just telling you about. In order to hook this up, I'm using 40 feet of RG58A. And again, as I mentioned, it's actually hooked up to a 9-to-1 unun, which then is hooked up to a gutter. Oh, and in between the unun and everything else in this transmitter, there's a pass-through, a comment pass-through for the window that's also hooked up to, just to kind of give you an idea of how everything is working out today. Now that we have both of these plugged in, we'll plug in that power. Now, when you actually go ahead and you plug everything in, there should be an indication under here that there's power. And as you can see, we have a blinking amber status light. On the other side, there's a transmit light, which is not illuminated because this is currently not transmitting. Let's go back into the software. And now if we reread the settings, hopefully it'll show us something cool. Not much different because, well, there's not much that's changed since the last time I read it when it was plugged in. So let's change some stuff. Let's click on Auto GPS and let's save the settings. When we save these settings, it actually writes it to the WSPR transmitter unit itself, so that if we were to unplug it and plug it back in, the next time we plugged it back in, it would give us the correct information like Auto GPS. Now, there's a couple other things we can do here. And what I want to kind of just point out here is the serial port. Now, if I click serial port, this device is kind of freezing up a little bit, and I've never had any luck with it not freezing up, but I just want to make sure I'm set to the right serial port. So I'm going to jump into my device manager, and inside the device manager, the thing that we kind of want to point out here is COM17 is USB serial CH340. I didn't need to install any additional drivers for this to work because I probably already had a CH340 driver installed on here. However, the driver installation is on ZachTek's website, which of course makes things easier. But I have now confirmed in the device manager that this is COM17. So we'll go back into that software and just make sure that's selected. And then let's click on this boot configuration tab. Now, when the radio boots or when power is plugged in, USB is plugged in, it could do a few things on startup. It could be idle, so it just doesn't do anything, which is, I guess, maybe useful for some people. It could become a signal generator, which I haven't really messed with. But what I really wanted was a WSPR beacon. And so the fact that I don't need a computer and just automatically when I plug this thing into power, it'll start beaconing my signal, I think that's awesome. So I'm going to keep that to a WSPR beacon. And then we're going to click on, again, WSPR beacon here. Now, as I kind of mentioned, 160 meters didn't really do too well. 80 meters, it didn't do too well either, but we're going to continue on and I'm going to actually add 10 meters and I'm going to save those settings here. Okay, so now when we read them again, we should see that 10 meters is set still. It is. Now, pretty much all you do is you wait. Let's see what's going on with our GPS signal and see if we could acquire a better GPS signal. Okay, don't do me dirty. There we go. I just rebooted the software again and it seems to be working that time. So much better. And now we can see that we should be getting more results. If you'll notice, I selected 10 meters earlier and it didn't actually save it. So let's try to save it again and reread the settings and see if it actually is able to transmit at that point. So there we go. I'm going to click start here. And when I click start, basically it starts the process of actually transmitting our signals. But I'm at a 55% position lock. And this is what I was saying. Like, I don't know that necessarily... I mean, at a 55% signal lock, it's not transmitting. If I click start or stop, it's not really doing a lot. So let me save the settings one more time, but I'm going to click manual, okay? And then I'm going to click EN52 and see what happens. Now, one of the things that we should probably point out too, that if it lets us operate 10 meters, we feel like, oh, great, cool. We're getting more value for what we purchase. But just know that the low pass filter is not installed on 10 meters. And doing so, here, it even says it right here. A green square indicates the low pass filter is fitted in the transmitter for the band. And you can't see what I'm seeing. This serves as a reminder as to what band is okay to transmit on. However, nothing has been done to prevent the user from transmitting on any band, regardless of what filters are fitted or not. This is by design to give the maximum freedom for the user. And speaking of freedom, let's talk about that too, because like maybe, and this sounds obvious, but maybe you don't have permissions to be operating on these frequencies. If you don't have permissions to operate digital on certain frequencies, don't do it, right? Check your license and your band plan. But anyway, that's it. And so let's see what kind of results I got in 24 hours on my gutter on 200 milliwatts. If I jump over to whisper.rocks, pretty decent little site for checking your spots. I'm going to type in my call sign. I'm going to type in the last 48 hours because as I'm recording this, it's been a little bit more than 24 hours. And we're going to click on max spot and click 5,000. Basically, I want to see if there's 5,000, people have heard me, and if so, let's display who they were. Now, when I click search, it's going to take a minute, but I get this list of all these stations that heard me. And long story short, here is a list of them, right? But the cool thing is I could actually sort them by things like how far away they were. So like I was heard as far out as 15,000 kilometers. A VK station heard me, which that's an Australia station that just heard me. I was operating 20 meters on 200 milliwatts. Now that's pretty remarkable if you ask me. However, if I wanted to, I was also heard in, I think that's Brazil right there, 7,600 miles away. LX1DQ, look at that, 6,800 kilometers away. You see where this could be really interesting. Spain, or that's the Canary Islands right here. Long story short though, we could also click on a map and we could see on the map, look at that, Australia, Hawaii, the Canary Islands, Spain, Germany, Brazil, all on 200 milliwatts. That's pretty remarkable if you ask me, right? And I just want to check one thing. So let's go back to that table. And if we click again on how far away it was, these stations had been heard today, yesterday. Okay, cool. All within that 24-hour span. But also let's just check one thing here and look at the frequencies, right? So megahertz. Look at, I was actually heard some on 10 meters. Just within the last couple hours, a couple stations that heard me on 10 meters. So that's even kind of cool, right? KD9 HOE. KD9 Ho heard me, and he's only about 300 kilometers away. But still, that's pretty cool. Now, obviously, this is a fun time to be able to see on 200 milliwatts where your signal's being heard around the world. And I think it actually shows too, you don't need a lot to get around the world. 200 milliwatts on what we will call a compromised antenna in my gutter and a 9-to-1 unun. And more importantly, though, it gives me the opportunity at an HOA where I don't have the ability to transmit and my remote flex no longer is operational at the moment. So that's kind of like something I could do to be able to stay on the air and still have fun, right? But this is also a very valuable resource because I could use this when testing new antennas to test to see what the pattern looks like. But I think more importantly, kind of just what the propagation or the conditions are like that day. Hey, how does things look when I'm operating low power? And where am I likely to make contacts this day based upon my propagation with that low power? But I thought you would really enjoy seeing what the Whisper transmitter device is. Maybe you're interested in Whisper. You don't need a ZachTek Whisper transmitter device to do it, but I really like this device. It came to me at least completely assembled, ready to go. All I had to do was plug in things and configure what you saw there. And for the most part, it typically just works. Now you saw I had some problems in the configuration and the setup or running the executable. And also you saw that me restarting the executable seemed to do the job. So, for what I paid was $160, but that came with a 30-meter end-fed half-wave antenna. I think you can pick these up for a little bit less. One sec. You could pick these up for around $139. Hey, dang, the end of the episode, and I got this bad news for you. Currently, you could pick them up for $139, but most of them are out of stock. One that I noticed that's still in stock is the 8010. So for 139 US dollars, you can get the 8010. If I add it to my cart, I'm sure that it'll add shipping on there. And so I'm sure that me paying what I paid for this was an okay enough deal. Hey, this was Ham Radio Dude, a little bit random of an episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I like random, and I hope you have a good one. Thanks for checking it out, everybody. Hit that like or don't. I don't really care anymore. Operate Real Ham Radio. This is Real Ham. Cut that one out. I'm sure there'll be one or two crusty guys in the comments letting me know all about how I said something wrong.